Hi, welcome to today's episode of Live Healthy Now, and I'm joined by another brilliant guest today. We're going to talk about stress, burnout, and overwhelm, which are huge topics when it comes to health and well-being. We're seeing a big stress epidemic globally, so we've got someone very equipped to help us explore this topic and find out more about it. We've got Keir Wotherspoon joining us to really dive in and help you to understand what might be happening with yourself if you're feeling stressed and how you can implement some habits to support yourself and build more resilience. So welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Nicola. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, you're very welcome. So with all guests, Keir, I like to start off by asking what your most impactful healthy habit is that you have in your wellness toolkit.
My most impactful healthy habit. Well, I'm going to have to say sleep. And why I'm going to say this is because for about 5 years, I neglected sleep massively when I was building my gym. And it was something that I was getting about 4 or 5 hours sleep a night. It was ridiculous. But the more I started learning about sleep and how it impacts your performance, and this is something now that I'm really anal about and I spend a lot of time doing. So I'd have to say I do have a lot of other habits as well, but I would say the biggest one is sleep.
Oh, yeah, I love that. Sleep's one of my 5 pillars of wellness as well. So when it comes to sleep, what is kind of one or two things that you've put in place to make sure you are now getting better quality and enough sleep?
So the biggest thing with sleep, it is to have a regular bedtime, because what we've got to be able to do, we have to be able to regulate our circadian rhythm. That is the biggest point of sleep. So you kind of waking up on a morning, one of the things to get up on a morning is to get out and get some sunlight in your eyes. What that does, it kind of switches on your circadian rhythm. As soon as you do that, you then start the countdown, if you like, to sleep. But so by having that regular sunlight in your eyes and then having your regular bedtime like schedule, so whatever time it is you go to bed, that is the biggest thing you can do for sleep. That would promote a high quality sleep because it just regulates, and you get at that same time every night and you're starting feeling tired and you kind of want to go to bed and go to sleep.
Yeah, brilliant. And I always answer a question if I'm asked on podcasts about sleep with kind of the same answer, in that it starts the morning when you get up, and people are always quite surprised. They'll go, "Oh,
Mm.
right. Oh, I didn't expect you to say that," because they think I'm going to focus on bedtime and evening, which is definitely important and it's a part of it. But with you in that the way you start your day, for example, having sunlight, movement, some of the mindset stuff is really important, isn't it, with that body clock, to make sure then when it is evening and bedtime that you are ready to sleep. Your body knows that it's time for you to go to bed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm such an advocate for morning
Yeah.
routines. Morning routine was something that I've done a lot of research in, and I've experimented with a lot of different protocols with myself and my clients. But it was something that really helped me when I was in burnout, when I hit burnout in my gym. Developing a morning routine was something that absolutely just changed everything for me, because you pretty much, as soon as you start the day, that's how your day is going to go. Now, if you start up when you're stressed and you're full of anxiety and you kind of going in reactivity mode, that's how your day is going to be for the rest of the day. What you do in the morning predicts everything else from there.
And I never used to be aware of that. And when I talk about my 5 pillars in the workshops I run, I always use my story and start with how my mindset was probably the thing that then negatively impacted my other 4 pillars, the movement, nutrition, sleep, and stress, because the way that I woke up, the thoughts that I had, and how I spoke to myself was setting me up for absolute disaster every day, because I was in such a negative downward spiral within seconds of my brain coming into consciousness each morning. But I didn't know that back then. I had no idea that I was, helping me to feel even worse because of what I was starting off each day like. So yeah, I love that. And I think we'll come on to more. I definitely wanted to ask you a bit more about sleep, because I know sleep is one of the areas that you like to cover in the work you do because of how
Yeah.
important it is, and then that link to stress. So with stress, burnout and overwhelm, we've all heard about stress. We've all I think, always had an awareness of stress, maybe not really understanding what it truly is and how it works in our body. But burnout and overwhelm have definitely become two terms that are much more commonly used now, aren't they? And I think COVID, the pandemic, started to bring those more to the forefront for lots of reasons. Is that how you see it as well? Yeah.
100%. I think it's one of those terms that yes, it does get branded around a lot now. And I think good and bad. Bad side of it is a lot of people are jumping on the burnout bandwagon and claiming help you with burnout and all that type of thing, but without actually understanding what burnout is. And I think this is the biggest thing because what is burnout? And that's a lot of people aren't aware of
Mm,
actually what burnout is because burnout isn't stress. And a lot of people think, well, I'm just stressed, so I'm burnt out. And that's not what burnout is. Burnout is it's been in a prolonged state of chronic stress for a period of time, for a long period of time. Burnout it's not something that happens in a couple of weeks or a couple of months. It's something that can be actually happening over years, even decades at a time. And for me, since I've been doing a lot of research and working with guys and experiencing it myself, it's having an understanding of what it actually is and how we can then solve the issue really. Because like I said, it is something that is becoming more aware, which is a great thing because I think like the World Health Organization now recognizes it actual as a psychological condition, as opposed to this actually
mm.
came about. Burnout was actually came about in the 70s. That's when it was very first coined, and now kind of in 2019, and only now it's starting to be recognized as occupational hazard, really.
Yeah. And what you touched on there about the difference with stress, is that, and this is why I kind of said we all know about stress, as in that it is part of human life, it's how we live, and that we all get it to some degree, but we don't, majority of people don't have then the extra knowledge about what's actually going on in your body with it and how it works, and then the risks if you are someone who's continuously experiencing stress. And I think what a lot of people miss because of that is it doesn't have to be, stress from being in, I don't know, a really high powered job with lots of responsibility and weight over your shoulders and, that really intense stress that you might see in movies or on TV, for example. It can just be very normal life stress that because of how you respond to it, if you have that for a prolonged period of time, is enough to push you into burnout, isn't it? And that's the risk I think that we're facing is people think, oh, it's fine, this is just life. I just, have to deal with this every day. But they don't know what happens when you add that up over consecutive months and or even years it might take someone to then hit that burnout point.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the thing is with stress, we need stress for growth. That, without stress, you're not going to be able to grow. You
Mm-hmm.
need stress for growth, but it has to be controlled. It has to be kind of counteracted with recovery strategies and, healthy habits and those types of things. But I like to define burnout. When people say, well, what is burnout? What I kind of try to get them envisage, I like to try to create mental models for people. And what I kind of say is, imagine there's a big boulder in the middle of a road. Like you're walking across the path, you're walking the path, whatever destination you're trying to get to, and there's a big boulder in the middle of the road. Now, what most people do, what everybody does, what I've done when I had my gym, was just try to push this boulder out of the way without actually stopping. But you're pushing and you're pushing and you're pushing, and you're not giving yourself any time to breathe, or you're not giving yourself any time to sit back, reflect, and how can I approach this in a different way? How can I tackle this in a different way? Or they become oblivious to this boulder in the way and they just stay still and they don't try to move forward. And burnout can be, there's actually three types of burnout. But yeah, because you've got this kind of boulder and it's just, you're pushing and pushing and pushing, but you're not trying to find a different strategy to get around it. And eventually you just become so exhausted, you have nothing left. And you become defeated, you feel demoralized, and you just lose all sense of purpose and passion. And this is the problem. This is where people get to. And that's when it's gone past the point of stress, past the point of feeling, a little bit tired or whatever it is, that you've gone into that state of demoralization and, depersonalization where you feel defeated. And that's kind of what burnout is, really.
Mm-hmm. So Obviously there's a difference between burnout and depression, because I just want to call that out, because I think when you're describing it there, again, this comes down to people's understanding of depression, and that they might think,
Mm.
well, they're not the same thing, that you just hit a point where you can't cope anymore, that it's too much. But the two are very different, aren't they?
Yes.
Burnout, I mean, both illnesses have a lot of physical as well as the mental symptoms. But yeah, just to maybe set that up and help us understand burnout a bit more, like what are the key characteristics if you were to experience burnout?
So the key characteristics of burnout is I'll go through the three types of burnout as well because then that'll make some sense and it'll build like the picture of burnout. So the key characteristics, the first one and the main one is physical and emotional exhaustion. Again, imagine pushing that boulder. Yeah, you're pushing it, you're pushing it, you're pushing it, you become physically exhausted, you become mentally exhausted. You deplete all your mental capacity and your physical capacity. And this leads to a lot of cynicism. You become very resentful of maybe the people around you. You become resentful of your work. And then that kind of leads into like depersonalization where you're not actually fulfilling maybe your dreams or ambitions. You're not getting the results that you want. And you become almost detached from the thing that you're doing. And I think this is very different to, again, I'm not an expert in depression at all, but this is the kind of difference between that. It's not, the different, depression is a completely different beast on its own. Uh, Burnout is generally something that you can control because of your circumstances, because it's generally down to more of that output. You're trying to achieve burnout. If you're trying to achieve something and you're not getting the desired results, that is probably the best way to describe it. You're trying to achieve something, you're not getting the desired results, and you're pushing against this resistance, and eventually that weighs you down and weighs you down. And that's what burnout is. And again, depression is completely different. But there's actually three types of burnout. So the first type of burnout is overworked burnout, overloaded burnout, sorry. Now, this is the most common. What people think of burnout is when, you have those people who are just constantly working at a very, very high level. And, again, what you were saying before about what you see on TV, you have this executive who is at this really high level and all of a sudden they're going to this kind of crash and then they're on the floor and in the corner and the shaking, and that doesn't really happen in real life. It's just in the movies, but it's that high level of constantly pushing without having those mental breaks, and you just absolutely fry your brain. And that's what it comes down to mainly. It all happens in your brain. You kind of take your brain to its maximum capacity, you push past that, and you're kind of done. And that's like overload. Then you have under challenged burnout, which is under challenge where if you're kind of in a job or you're in your business and you're not challenged by it, like you're not challenged by the work that you're doing, you might be just kind of plodding along and you're just not challenged by it, and you become worn out. And you become worn out because there's no, go back to stress, there's not enough stress in that challenge to push you on further. So you become burnt out because of that, which I found when I started reading about it, I found that really interesting and kind of, it's almost like boredom burnout. You're bored of the work that you do and you're going to work and you're bored of it. You can become burnt out because of that. And that's what I'm trying to kind of get across to people is not just this high level executive or person who's got the business who's working at a high level all the time. It comes in different tiers. And the final one is that neglect. Again, let's use a guy who's in business because I've experienced this myself when I very first opened my gym. I had no guidance. There was no structure. I was kind of winging it, and there was a lot of stresses to do with the business, but I had no guidance and no structure. And again, you become worn out because you start questioning your own abilities and you start having a lot of self-doubts. And this is neglect burnout. So again, it comes down into different tiers of where they're at. And this is when I work with the guys, I try to understand where they're at. And then because each one's approached differently, each part of that, then three tiers of burnout's approached differently. That's why it's having an understanding of what it actually is, so you can break it down, and then you can start applying strategies that you need to solve that.
Yeah. And as you said, you work mainly with men. Do you think that there is a significant difference between men and women and how they each deal with stress, and then, what plays out for them with burnout?
Yeah, guys won't talk about it. That's, that I've worked with a lot of women. Like, I spent a lot of my early years as a personal trainer working with women. And what I loved about that, they were just so open. Like a lot of women I want, they would just tell you what was the matter with you. They would come in, some of the things they would tell you, you'd be like, whoa. But what I loved it because it was just a case of so open. You were much easier to help because they were open and honest. Guys aren't. Guys are holding back because we're kind of being
Mm,
conditioned to man up and get on with it, and don't show weakness, and being conditioned to all these ridiculous fixed-minded ways of living, and we become and from a mental capacity probably there's no difference. It's just the fact we don't want to open up, we're too afraid to open up. And I think that's something that needs to change. And it is. I mean, it is something that is, you look at someone like Steve Bartlett, for example. He's promoting this thing about mental health and everything, and how people should be more open. And I love that all these things are getting done, especially by someone as influential as him, because he can get his message out to more people. Again, from my perspective, that's why I want to work with guys mainly, is because I know how it is. I know how you can sit on your problems and how they manifest, and without talking about them, how detrimental it could become to your mental health.
yeah, absolutely. And the talking aspect is one that's so important. There's another podcast, I'm not sure whether it's going to have already come out when yours is out now or after, I've done with someone else talking about this, with depression and men's mental health, and the challenges that we still face as a society with normalising speaking up. We put a lot of pressure on the person who has the problem to be the one to speak up, instead of, just generally being very accepting of having conversations when you do feel good and then when you don't feel good, and so on. Because with burnout and stress, again, I think a lot of people feel as though it's just okay to go through that it's a normal part of navigating a busy life.
Mhm.
And so therefore they aren't necessarily sharing how hard it is. Obviously I work mainly with women, and I do hear this so often, in that it's kind of like, well, this is just life, isn't it? I just think, they've hit a point where they know something needs to change, but at the same time, they're telling themselves, oh, well, this is just how it has to be. Is there another way? Can there be any other way of doing things? Surely you've just got to kind of put up and shut up. But yes, it's so important, isn't it? And with stress, are you able to share a little bit about that? What the difference is between stress and burnout? What's good stress that would
Mhm.
help us to perform in our lives?
I think it's what you got to think about stress. Stress actually is what gets you out of bed in the morning. Like when you get up in the morning, and this is why I go back to the sunlight on the morning, you need to elevate your stress hormone, which is cortisol. Like that's essential. If you didn't elevate cortisol, you wouldn't wake up in the morning. So stress is essential for you to actually wake up. Stress is essential for alertness. Now, when we're talking about maybe like work-related stress and business-related stress and all these types of things, these things are essential because it's what actually drives you forward. Because when you're stressed, it puts you in this high state of alertness. The problem is when you're excessively in this high state of alertness and you haven't got those recovery strategies in, or you haven't got those, you're not identifying or solving the problem that is actually causing it. Again, bringing down to burnout, it's about something, there's a stressor. And this is the stress isn't the problem, it's the stressor. What is this one thing or accumulation of things that is causing that chronic level of stress that you can't then bring back down to a normal level? And it could be anything. There's a lot of ways you can go. It could be something to do with the health, could be something to do with the financial relationships. It could be anything, but it's identifying what that is, because we need to understand that level of stress we need for progress. We need it to progress in life, to build our businesses, to show up every day and be there for our kids and families. But what we need to be able to do is control it to a level where it
Mm,
doesn't burn us out and burn our brains out. And that's essentially what that does. It's like high level, but all of the time. It's like imagine you go to the gym, right? And you want to get stronger, but you go to the gym for 10 hours a day and you try to squat 100 kilos for 10 hours of the day. What's going to happen? By half an hour, you're going to be on the floor, collapsed. You're not going to be able to perform anymore. If you do that every day, you're going to burn out. You'll probably die or something horrible. But you know what I mean? It's like the same happens to athletes.
Yeah.
Athletes get burnt out because they don't have, they're constantly pushing at this high level. And it's good to push at that high level. We need that to grow. But if we're always at that high level, then that happens.
Yeah. It's about balance, isn't it? It's as you say, you need to be aware of the stresses that affect you in a negative way. Like, what is it that's causing you to become really highly stressed, and trying to work on those and have that awareness. And then having balance so that you do things that take you away from being in a stress state, but also that are then building up your resilience, and your mindset is a huge part of it, isn't it? Having the right habits to build that, so that then when you do have those stresses, which are good ones, they don't affect you in a negative way. And
Mm.
certainly for me, in my backstory, the way that I would be stressed was very damaging to my mental and physical health. And now I know that I'm still the same person, things still stress me. And at times I do get more stress than maybe I should. Stress is definitely one of the things I'm continuing to focus and improve. But because of how much I've improved all of my other habits and my overall health, like there's just less impact and less reaction, if you like, to the things that are still there in my life. I haven't took those stresses
Mm.
away, or some of them anyway, but they don't have the same response that they would have had like 5 years ago, for example. So I think it's having that balance, isn't it, with the good habits, the helpful habits, so that the stresses that are part of our lives every day don't then materialize in a way that becomes harmful for you in your health.
Exactly. It's about building those, what you said at the beginning of this about the resilience. Now, resilience is so important, but you don't build resilience by going all in. And this is the thing, like, again, go back to guys who are running businesses. They're looking at these entrepreneurs who, have probably been in business for a lot of years, and they're comparing themselves to all of the success that they've had now, where they're working all of these hours and all this type of thing. But you think about it, if you're just starting a business and you go in and you're working like all these ridiculous hours, you haven't developed that capacity or the kind of resilience to take on the stresses of that business. Whereas somebody who's been in business for 20 years, what causes them stress now is much, much higher. Like the things that they've battled with, I don't know, when they very first start out, they've overcome them, they've become resilient for it. They probably, again, let's use the gym as an example. It's like, I've been to the gym since I was 14-year-old. Now, imagine if I went to the gym with someone who'd never been to the gym in their life and they'd done the same workout as me. They're never going to recover from that. I can deal with that
Yeah.
workout because I've built that resilience within my body. I've built that strength of my muscles. I've had all of those years of development to be able to deal with that stress. Now, if I put somebody who hasn't had that in the same thing, they're just going to collapse. They're going to burn out. They're going to destroy themselves. And that's what we see a lot of, especially in today's social media world, because we say, oh, well, this is what I should be doing. And they're jumping into the deep end without actually being prepared for it. And I think that,
Yeah.
again, what you were saying is about, do you become resilient to the stresses that you're accounted with?
So it, there's bound to be someone or people listening, who are struggling with stress right now. What's something that they can do to start to improve their response to stress, so that they are, aware of this path road to burnout, and trying to make sure that they're not on that path, that stress becomes more normal for them in a healthier way?
So, I mean, the thing is, again, when it comes and we're talking about like dealing with a stressor, first of all, you've got to identify that stressor. And to me, this is the main problem that's being kind of done. There's a lot of advice about health strategies and all these types of things. And yes, absolutely, you need to have these things in place. But unless you are identifying firstly that stressor, the things that you're putting in place are kind of, they're not solving the problem. They're just causing short-term relief. But what I would say is, so the first and foremost thing is to identify that thing that's causing the stress. Now, do you need help with that? Is it something you can solve on your own? Whatever that is. But then it's also about putting those practices in place. And the first thing I would say to people is sleep. Sleep better. Like, if you've done anything, go to sleep. and start sleeping, because when you sleep, that's where the magic happens. And that's, this is why I love sleep so much, because we don't know a lot about it. And that's why it's so magical. Because when you sleep, this is when things happen. This is when you solve problems. This is when you get stronger. This is when your brain develops, your body develops. All these magical things happen when you sleep. So in all your emotional state, you actually improve your emotional state just by sleeping better. So it's a case of, if there was one thing that you had to do today, improve your sleep.
And the thing with sleep as well is how it plays out into the rest of your day, with your lifestyle choices, your reactions, the way you feel, as well as all of those restorative things that are going on, which most people don't know about, things that are happening in our body with our systems and replenishing and renewing and so on, which are absolutely vital for life. I love a saying by Matthew Walker. I'm sure you've read his book. I haven't read it all, but I've listened to a
Yeah.
lot of his podcasts. He
Podcast.
talks about sleep being the Swiss Army knife of life, because it's everything. It's as they always say, it's the most missed part of the wellness piece is, then when you haven't had enough sleep or the right quality of sleep, because there's a difference between, thinking you're asleep for 8 hours to actually having good quality sleep for 8 hours. What happens then the next day, and how that affects your diet choices, how hungry you are, the way you react to things. So then when those stresses are coming in, the way you respond to those stresses is very different between someone who hasn't had enough sleep and someone who has. And there's lots of research now, isn't there, starting to come out about the impact of productivity, to performance in the workplace for people, when they're struggling with sleep, and how it squashes creativity and focus and so on. And so, yeah, it's just all round such a vital part of being healthy, isn't it? And so, for yourself, you've obviously, as you started with, made that a habit and something you really value. And have you then found that that's shifted completely the way you can deal with stress?
Exactly. And the best way to kind of, anyone want to say, what does sleep do? You make worse choices if you don't sleep. That's whether you're making decisions in your business, whether you're making decisions, you go to the fridge for food, whatever decision you make, if you don't work on your sleep, you make worse decisions. And that is the best way to kind of, to really narrow that down, to say how important sleep, you will make worse decisions. And that's not even affecting everything else which health related.
Yeah. And I know you touch on time as well. You talk about like how important your energy is, and time. And time's usually the barrier that I see people putting in place to change and things in their life to being healthier. And it's, like, I need more sleep, but I haven't got time to sleep. There's too much to do, that kind of thing. So how do we shift that mindset around time, and how important those 24 hours are in your total day?
It comes down to prioritization. I hate, there's a lot of people say, oh, you've got the same 24 hours in the day. I actually had a conversation with someone about this, and yes, we all have the same 24 hours in the day, but our 24 hours are made up differently. Now, coming from me, I have 3 kids, and I'm building a business. My life is quite busy. It is really, really busy. And compare that to someone who has 20-year-old, who has no responsibilities, has all the time in the world. Like, yes, we do have the same 24 hours in the day, but my 24 hours are a lot different to what that other guy's 24 hours is. But it's about prioritization. So it's about saying, okay, what do I deem important at this moment in time? Do I deem important watching Netflix at 9 o'clock at night? Or do I deem important actually not watching the TV, getting my journal out, writing a few things down? I like to say, give your brain a request to your subconscious before you go to sleep. What problem you're trying to solve, write that down, because when you sleep is when your brain solves problems. Thomas Edison is one of Thomas Edison's quotes, actually, and he was a pretty successful guy. But I do like this because it actually, what he was saying relates a lot to the literature now, that when you sleep is when you solve problems. So giving yourself a request to your subconscious before you go to sleep. So yes, if you're sitting on a night time and you're binge watching Netflix or you're scrolling on your phone, is that a priority? Again, you can't just say, this guy's doing this woman's doing that. You don't know until you actually speak to somebody and you can identify maybe what they're doing. You can only make you know, an assumption. But from working with a lot of people do waste a lot of time sitting and watching TV, scrolling on the phones. Again, they're not putting these practices in place. They're not prioritizing. They're not making priority things like sleep, because it seems like it's unproductive. Well, I could get I could get another hour's worth of work if I stay up until 10 o'clock. It's like you could, but that level of work that you're doing will be very, very poor. You'd be better off going to bed earlier, get up an hour earlier, because your creativity on the morning is going to be a lot higher. So that hour that you're doing on the night for work, say between 9 and 10, you're going to actually get 2 or 3 hours worth of work done in the space of that hour, because your creativity is higher. You're more focused, you're more alert. And yeah, it's just
I totally agree
prioritization.
with that on the 24 hours, because we all have different commitments and things we have to do in our lives, and everyone has different lives. But I talk about it being, your own curated toolkit. There's a toolbox there of what you can do to improve and live a healthy lifestyle. But what tools you apply for your toolkit vary, depend on what you need, which usually comes from whatever season of your life you're in. And if you are someone that's got very young kids, that's very different to someone then like
Mm.
me, who has a 15-year-old who's much more independent and capable of, getting some food for herself if I'm still working, for example. I could not have set this business up if she was only 4 or 5 years old, because of
Yeah.
what I would need to do and want to do at that age. So we've got to be compassionate to ourselves as well, and
Mhm.
realistic with what we can do. But exactly like you said, it's about priorities, because we all do have 24 hours and we all can do things in those 24 hours to improve our health. It doesn't have to be a block of 1 hour to go to the gym or a block of 30 minutes to meditate. You can do things in smaller amounts of time that still have a huge impact and create a ripple effect as well. But it's about knowing what you want and how you want to feel, and then being intentional about how you make it happen, because so many people just plod on and moan and wish that their lives were different. You're like, oh, I wish I wasn't so stressed. I wish I had time. I'd love to eat healthier. But, and then when you do start working with them and you start breaking it down, they're actually very surprised at how possible it is to change, because of the way they're living isn't actually giving them what they want. And so when they realize that, it's then becomes a no-brainer to go, well, actually I'm not doing that anymore. It might even be spending time with a certain person. It's like, actually that's not something that gives me what I want to achieve, so that's easily changed and swapped to something more valuable. So yeah, it's about your perception of time, really, isn't it?
It is, and just to touch on what you kind of saying there as well, and it's like saying we're told that we should get 8 or 9 hours sleep a night. Now, I'm lucky if I can get to bed before 9 o'clock. I'm sorry, I'm actually lucky if I can get my kids in bed before 9 o'clock on the night. We have a young baby, she's only 5 months old, and I have two kids who are
Mm.
very hyperactive on the night time, let's say. And it can be, let's say, stressful to get them to bed on a night time. So I'm not under any illusions that I'm going to be in bed by 8 o'clock and have my 9 hours sleep before I get back up at 5 o'clock. It's not going to happen. But what I can do is I can make the most of my time. So, okay, well, I'll try to get in bed around about the same time every night. But what I want to do is I want to make that time that I've got, whether you've got 5 hours to sleep or you have 9 hours to sleep, I want to make that the best quality sleep that I can. That is the best that I can do. It's
Yeah.
like going to the gym. I go to the gym and I set a time for 45 minutes. I'm in the gym and I'm out by 45 minutes. Could I spend there an hour? Time wise, I don't have the time to spend an hour there, but I could quite easily train for an hour or 90 minutes. I just don't have the time. So I set a time for 45 minutes. If I don't get my gym done, it doesn't matter. I leave, because that is the only time that I have. But I try to get as much as I can done in that bit of time. And again, it's down prioritization. Okay, I've got 45 minutes this morning to get done. Let's see what I can get done today. Okay, I've got 7 hours to sleep. Let's see how good I can get my sleep tonight. And that's what I mean by prioritization. It's making it important, not so much that you kind of say, well, I'm going to sacrifice my family so I can go to bed early. It's like, no, it just, how can I make the best of the time that I've got?
Yeah. And it's all about like boundaries, isn't it? You know, knowing what you want to achieve. So being intentional about, I am going to prioritize sleep, intentional about, I am going to move my body, intentional about, I am going to do activities for my mindset like journaling or meditating and so on. And then putting boundaries in place that mean that is the thing you're going to protect and do and, you know, you've committed to. So that
Mhm.
then if a program comes up on the TV, you go, well, actually no, because I've ring fenced this time to do journaling, and I know that that's important. And I find, you know, once you've set that intention, you can then, you know, be much more committed to making sure it happens. And that, I think that's the power I see with people that grows and empowers them even more is when they start doing those things, which can and probably do feel very hard to begin with.
Mhm.
Once you start to feel the benefit, then that feeling of being in control over how you're living and what you're spending your time doing, and then feeling the way it makes you feel because of that, you want more of that. So then it becomes easier to say, actually, I am going to prioritize going to sleep, or I am going to prioritize working out, and so on. And I think just kind of to wrap it all back up to the stress and burnout, it's it's just so important that people see where those activities and habits are taking them, isn't it? You know, it can be easy to miss the fact that the bad habits are pushing you on to potentially a road of burnout or overwhelm or other mental illness or ill health. And you know, having that awareness so that you can get intentional about the healthy, helpful, good habits to say, yeah, these are going to play out over time and help me to feel so much stronger and happier and deal with stresses that come up in life so that you are, you know, overall just in a much happier place, because that's what it's all about at the end of the day. We all want to live a happy, fulfilled life, don't we?
It does, and it all boils down to your health. At the end of the day, it's like if you,
Mm,
it's all about just having, it's building habits. It's like building habits, rewiring your brain, um, and going from that sort of fixed way of being to opening yourself up to new perceptions and new habits. And these don't happen overnight. Like if you want to get you want to get in good shape, then if you join a gym and you've never been to a gym in your life, that's probably going to be very intimidating and you might not stick to it. Just go for a walk. If you like, get up early and go for a walk, make that a habit. Because then what you can do is, I like to differentiate the difference between an activity and a habit. The habit is exercise. So whether you go for a walk or whether you go for a 90-minute gym session, it's still that habit. Yeah, exercise is the habit. The activity is what you do then. Build yourself up to be able to go to the gym. Build yourself up to do all of these other things that you want to do, but start with that little thing first. Like, okay, I want to get healthier. I'm just going
yeah.
to go for a walk. Build that habit in. Eventually, you become, you develop your brain and you rewire your brain to be somebody who exercises or somebody who prioritizes
Exactly.
sleep.
Yeah. And that's like me. I used to get a lot of comments when I used to be based in the office at Nike. People would say, oh, you've got so much willpower. You're so good. You're so committed. Oh, how do you manage to go to the gym? And it's because I'd made that habit. It's who I am. It's my identity. I'm someone who exercises. You know, I
Mm.
dislike when I go on holiday not being able to move my body in the normal way. I usually try and take workout kit. Wasn't like that years ago. This has been probably over the last 7 years or so that it's really become part of who I am. So that whether it ends up being, you know, a 15-minute walk or a 45-minute weight session in the gym, it doesn't matter because, as you say, the habit is that I've moved my body. I've got this need that it's part of how I go about my day and live, and that's when it becomes easy because it flows in your life and who you are. You don't have to remind yourself, remember to do it, force yourself, and battle mentally with why you should or why you shouldn't. It's just there, isn't it? It's as,
It is.
kind
And
of
you said
easy as
something
the
brilliant
fact you
there,
have to
Nicola.
eat every day.
Exactly. There's one thing you mentioned there that's just summed all out of brilliant. It's part of who I am. And that you couldn't
Mm-hmm.
put that in a better way. It's part of who I am. But part of who you are takes time to develop, doesn't it?
Yeah. And that's why a lot of people fail, because they know they want to change and they know they want to feel different, to feel better. And they just want it there and then. As humans, we're being primed to want instant gratification and reward, especially the way we've evolved as society now. We want that
Absolutely.
success, the win straight away. Yeah, so then when you'll have seen this over the years with training in the gym, people are like, I just want to be fit, or I just want a six pack, or I just want to lose 2 stone. And then when it doesn't happen straight away, they get, down about it and start the whole self-doubt negative spiral of, well, I can't do it. I'm not a person who's like that. I can't keep this up. It's too hard, blah, blah, blah. So they give up, and then that story becomes
Mhm.
ingrained that, well, I'm just not a person who can do X, Y, Z, whatever it is. But then, they're missing the point of, it's a journey, it's a constant journey, isn't it? And it's about becoming that person rather than having that goal of 2 stone or a six
Yeah,
pack, and then you've got it and it's like, oh, I can breathe, I can go back to normal life again. That's not how it works, and that's why so many people fail, because that's the mentality that and approach that they have, isn't it?
it does. And unfortunately, again, we live in this world where it's you can get this result, and it's not about the result. The result is just something that you may or may not get. The whole point of it is about the process. It's about the development. It's about that journey that you go through to change you into the person that you want to be. And but that's not sold because it's not sexy. Like, people don't want to be told about what's a journey, it's a process, and this is how you develop, and so you become a better person and a healthier person. And because but I want to lose 2 stones. Like,
Mm,
that's great. Like, have that as a vision, and you love to get to that. But when you become tied to that, you lose the enjoyment. It's like, don't go and do exercise that you don't enjoy, because if you do that, you will resent it. Then you will kind of say, well, exercise, I hate it. But actually, if you try something that you like, it's like, don't build a business that you don't enjoy. Don't do work that you don't enjoy, because you end up resenting it. And again, it comes back down to that burnout. If you're pushing against something you don't enjoy, you're going to end up resenting it. You're going to become cynical. You're just going to, you're going to hit that point of overwhelm and stress, excessive stress, and eventually you become burnt out. And it happens
mm.
in all different modes.
Yeah, and I've been there. I've experienced burnout, a couple of times actually, and really felt the physical impact of that, to a point of not really being able to even get up and function in the day, and struggling mentally in lots of different ways as well, because of just constantly being in that push, that hustle mentality mode. And I think for me, how I've seen like COVID and the pandemic play out, it gave people a lot of opportunity to reflect. Not everybody had time. Like, I had to work full time the whole way through it. But I think it pressed the pause button in a lot of respects for people to go, oh, hang on, I've got one life and it's very fragile. Certainly what happened with people in COVID, and all of the deaths and just ongoing health problems we've seen because of it, it's definitely woken a lot of people up to how fragile and short their lives are. And so I think, when we've started resuming normality, people have realised that that pace of life is just very difficult to maintain. And,
Mhm.
it's not something we can obviously really solve here, or talk much more about, but it's just, I think, yeah, starting with the awareness of maybe that extra pressure you're putting on yourself to have it all and do it all and achieve it all, and that society's led us to believe will equal your success and your happiness that you want. And just, I think, taking this opportunity to think about where you are at in your life and what is causing you stress, what could be done different, and do you need to change something? Because we spend a
Mhm.
long time at work, we spend a lot of time trying to achieve what we think is success without really taking that step back to well, just refine it, I think, for who we are rather than what we think we should be doing. So I just wanted to kind of wrap up, Keir, with I saw on, I can't remember if it was one of your posts or on your website, that you talk about 3 rules for life, and I thought these were maybe good takeaways for people. I usually ask for like one tip that someone can put in place for a habit. I know we had a bit of a tip earlier for overwhelm with sleep, but you talk about your 3 rules of life, which I love, which are you working on projects that bring you happiness, which I think we've just kind of been diving into a bit there, doing things that fill you up,
Mm.
spending quality time being present with people you love, and then doing something every day that helps strengthen your body and mind. So with those 3 things, like what would be something you could say to someone to get started with? What would be a good one that links again into, I mean, they're all going to help reduce stress, but
Yeah.
what advice would you suggest?
I mean, the biggest thing, what I've kind of noticed is a lot of people are doing work they don't enjoy. And I think that is the biggest cause for burnout because they're doing things that they don't enjoy. Find something that you might not be in a position where you can say, well, I'm just going to quit this and I'm going to go and do this. Maybe not. But what you can do is you can start something you enjoy. You can start a project. You can do something that's going to give you happiness and fulfillment. It could be just writing online. It could be writing blogs. It could be doing photography. Do something that gives you purpose that maybe in the future you can make some money from and it could become a full-time thing. I think if we all have little projects to work on, that brings a lot of self-satisfaction. And we need that. As humans, we need to have that level of fulfillment and that satisfaction. Identify what that is and go and start working on that today. Obviously, the second one is about the family and the relationships. It's like just spend some time and just watch your kids play. Get down and play with your kids and smile at them and just try to switch off from all the stresses of work and everything else that's kind of going on and be present in the moment. And I know that kind of sounds a little bit woo-woo with a lot of people, but it is just being about present in the moment and saying, you know what? It doesn't matter what's going on because at this moment in time, I have this opportunity to spend some time with my wife, my husband, my kids. I'm going to savor this time because something might happen tomorrow and I don't get an opportunity to do this again. God forbid that doesn't happen, but you don't know. You can't say, well, I've got the next 20 years to
Yeah.
live. You could go outside and get knocked over by a car. You could. It, just savor those moments. And again, you just do everything that you can do every single day, whether it's just a walk, better on your sleep. Just take a box. I like to have 3 buckets. 3 buckets. But even if it's a grain of sand in each bucket, every single day, a grain of sand, a grain of sand, over time that is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Yes, it's not going to happen in 6 weeks. But guess what could happen in 10 years? You could have a bucket that's half full that used to be empty. All because you did a little bit of sand every single day. In each bucket, 3 buckets, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, every single day. And that's how you change your life and that's how you become happy, in my opinion.
I love that. It's so simple. And this is what I would leave you with, is for anyone listening, is it is simple. It might not be hard to or easy to do, but it's so simple to make big change. And exactly as you've just explained there with that bucket analogy, it's just about adding that grain of sand every day and you will see a difference because of that. And when you were explaining or suggesting what someone could do there, one of the things that came to mind as you touched on, we have got one life, is that regret that's cited in I love, it's one of my favorite books, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, is one of those 5 regrets is that they wish they'd spent more time with the people they loved, because we
Mm-hmm.
just think, oh, I've got to do, and I've got to keep going, and that hustle mentality again. And it's not just about thinking, well, I have to do it today because I might not have tomorrow. It's much more than that. It impacts your well-being and happiness like twofold or 100-fold, doesn't it? So take those opportunities, and even if it is just that 5 minutes when you come home from work, to switch off and spend a bit of time just engaging. Maybe you do it over your evening meal or bedtimes and so on. But those things do wonders. I know when my daughter was young, I used to love bedtime and story time. And when she got to an age where she didn't want a story anymore, I felt the loss of that because I got so
Mm-hmm.
much from that for me. And that's something that I felt, and thought, oh, I'm disappointed now that that's gone, because I was gaining from that for my own well-being. So
No,
yeah, I've really
exactly.
enjoyed chatting. Yeah, it's been great. Yeah,
Thank
so
you for
so
having me
much
on, Nicola. It's been a pleasure.
wisdom, and yeah,
Thank you for having me
you're
on. It's
very
been absolutely.
welcome. It's been fantastic. Yeah. Do you want to just share where anyone can reach you and find out a bit more about you if they'd like to?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do have on LinkedIn. I'm actually in the process of putting my website together now, which is why yesterday, Nicola, when you were messaging us, the links weren't working. So I am putting everything together with my website at the minute. But Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn is pretty much where I spend most of my time. But I do send out a weekly newsletter. If you want that, then obviously you can send me a DM or whatever. Find me on social, and I can send you and get a weekly newsletter update. Yeah, and I think I've sent you a link, Nicola, to a video. So check the video out if it's something that anything that I've been talking about today resonates with you. Maybe check out the video. I've got a 5-minute video where I explain kind of what I do. And there's a couple of case studies in there that you can kind of listen to. And this is the thing, I don't like, again, we're living in this world where everything gets pushed on everybody. It's like, you need this, you need this, you need this. And it's a case of, look, okay, yeah, this is what I do. If you want to come and learn more, then come on over. If not, cool. Maybe, you can go somewhere else. But
Hmm.
yeah, that's what the video is for. Just, okay, this is what I do. If you want to work with us, cool. If not, that's all right.
Yeah, exactly. And this is why I bring different guests to the podcast, because everyone's at a different point in their life, experiencing different things. Some things are going to be hitting people right where they're at now. Others, they might know someone else who's struggling with this and they can pass you on to them, or they just take something from it that helps them in the future. It's fine. And as you say, it's about, especially when you are trying to make improvements with your health, find people who you resonate with, because the
Yeah,
community, the environment you build around you massively helps you to drive those changes you want to make. So for me in my journey, that's been a massive part of how I've managed to grow and develop and change my life, because of the people that I've curated in my social media feed, in my email inbox, and so on. So yeah, if Keir's
yeah.
someone who you think actually he could help me, definitely get on your email list. And you do some
What
brilliant videos as well on your social media.
Thank you. And what I just like to add to that as well, Nicola, is like if you following people who like listen to a podcast like this and everybody's like, I've resonated and what you're saying resonates, then start getting information from these people, because you can actually work a lot on your health without actually needing help, if that makes sense. I know you give a lot of good advice. I give out a lot of good advice, and you can use these, you can implement these strategies. They're not meant to say, look, you can get in lean as can be in 6 weeks' time, follow this method or whatever it is. There's a lot of free advice out there, and as long as you're following the right people, then you can actually use a lot of these strategies easily into your life and start making changes.
Yeah, and that's a great way to end. That's what we're all about on the Live Healthy Now podcast. Living healthy now by, listening, being inspired, and hopefully taking some action on the back of that. Brilliant. So thanks
Exactly,
again,
Nicola.
Keir.
Thank you very much.